On Wednesday night, we were treated to an absolute thriller of a game between the Stars and Kings. And tonight, we're due for another fantastic matchup when the Stars travel to Winnipeg to take on the Jets. We'll talk about both games in full detail on today's episode of Locked On Stars.
You're Locked On Stars, your daily podcast on the Dallas Stars. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Howdy, Stars fans. Welcome back to the Locked On Stars podcast, the only daily podcast covering the Dallas Stars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. I'm your host, Dane Lewis, your local expert on all things Dallas Stars hockey, credentialed member of the Stars Media, coming to you on this Friday, March 4th. Happy Friday, everybody. Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Locked On Stars. Whether this is your first time here or you are a recurring listener, thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Be sure to subscribe to and follow the Locked On Stars podcast wherever you find your podcast at, whether that's on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. We are free and available no matter where you listen or how you listen. Folks, thank you for bearing with me. I know I took Thursday off to give my voice a little bit of rest. I can still hear a little bit of soreness in my throat, but I do feel much better. Thank you guys for understanding, being patient. We are back, though, and I'm excited to talk about Wednesday's game between the Stars and Kings because what a dandy of a game that was. The Stars coming back from a 3-1 deficit to get the 4-3 win over the LA Kings. And we saw offense from the Stars team in a lot of unexpected places, and I feel like that's the big takeaway from Wednesday night's duel with the LA Kings. We see Luke Glendening score 43 seconds into the second period after Dallas squandered a plethora of good looks in the first period. It took Dallas a little bit of time to get going in the first, but they did get some quality looks, but also seemingly passed up a lot of good opportunities. That's one thing that's a little bit frustrating with this Stars team is they sometimes struggle to differentiate on when they should shoot the puck when they have it and when they should pass it and look for that open teammate or look to make that extra pass. That's something that I hope that they continue to work on, because there were several instances in last night's game, or rather Wednesday night's game, where, you know, maybe a guy had the puck, whether it was close to the goal or not, but you thought, yeah, they could probably shoot that, and they could probably either score a goal or get a high-quality look, make the goalie have to save it and hold it. You get a face-off right there by the goal, or maybe it ricochets and another teammate swats it in, what have you. But instead, they wait too long. They either make a bad pass or they just turn the puck over, and I believe that's how LA scored their second goal of the night. John Klingberg showed a little too much hesitancy with the puck, turns it over, gives up a breakaway goal to the Kings for them to go up 2-1 in the second. After that, Glendening goal. But nonetheless, good to see the Stars come out swinging and to see a guy that typically doesn't get a whole lot of offense generated in Glendening, but really good to see him get going. Ryan Suter recorded his fifth goal of the season and had by far his best game as a Dallas Star. He got an assist as well on the Alexander Radulov game winner later in the second frame. You know, not too much statistically for Ryan Suter this season, which is a shame given how much money he's being paid. But nonetheless, good to see him at least have a game like this and even contribute a little bit defensively. He made some really nice plays, especially down the stretch for this Stars team that I really, really liked. And hopefully it's a sign of things to come down the stretch of the regular season and as well into the postseason if the Stars do find themselves there. And of course, we can't talk about Wednesday's game without mentioning Alexander Radulov playing in his 500th career National Hockey League game and scoring the game-winning goal on the power play nonetheless. Great to see the Stars power play get a little bit of life bumped into it. They had some pretty miserable attempts earlier in the game, but that shot by Suter at the top of the blue line, bouncing off the inboards, Radulov in the perfect position, getting the shot off the ricochet, and then, of course, celebrating like Alexander Radulov, only the only way he knows how, which is with a lot of passion and, of course, with his teammates. So huge shout out to Rads. I know he's had a pretty interesting hockey career, starting in the NHL, playing over in Russia for a few seasons, coming back to the NHL, and he's become a fan favorite amongst Dallas Stars fans. And it may sound like low-hanging fruit at this point in the season just because of how much it's mentioned, but Dallas really needs this kind of offensive output every single game. These secondary scorers, whether it's guys that play defense or guys that play the forward position. I mean, if Dallas can get this kind of effort and output every single game, They might not win every game that they play, but they're at least going to put themselves in a chance to compete and have a chance to win, which is all you can really ask for in a situation like this. In that game, I mean, it came up big. Obviously, Jason Robertson scored a goal in the second period as well. The second goal of the game for the Stars. But I feel like that's just one of those things that we're so used to seeing that top line at least get one goal a game. Of course, Rupe and Joe assist on that goal. Still great to see that top line being effective, but the offense cannot only run through them. It needs to run through those secondary guys like Sagan, Ben, and Guryanov. But also, if we can get the bottom six and some of those, mid-tier defensemen on the team to get going, that's really going to bump this Stars team up to the next level. And this LA team is kind of similar to the Stars in that they're a pretty defensive-minded team. They block a ton of shots. And I think Dallas, they had 43 shots on goal on Wednesday night, especially after those 2 goals from Arthur Kaliev that put the Kings up 3-1. I mean, I feel like that's just one of those situations where the Kings really could have locked in at that point and just beaten the Stars to death, defensively blocking shots, forcing turnovers. But the Stars found a way to overcome and push through and eventually come back and get the win. And as just a testament to how the game was for the Stars, they bent, but they didn't break. And you can carry that all the way over to the crease as well with Jake Ottinger. Not his best game, giving up 3 goals in this contest, but still not a bad performance by any means. He continues to prove himself in the second half of this NHL season. He finds himself 7th in the league in goals against average, 6th in save percentage, up there with the likes of Igor Shesterkin, Andrei Vasilevsky, and of course, Markstrom from the Calgary Flames. So he's up with some pretty elite company, which is just crazy given his age. A lot of those guys that I named have been in this league for a while now. They're a lot older guys that have, been in the playoffs, been in championship situations. But Jake Ottinger, this is really his second year in the league, kind of almost his first year in the league, just because of how weird and odd last season was. I mean, this is kind of his true introductory to the league, and he's playing with, the likes of some of the best goalies in the National Hockey League. And so great to see him come up big down the stretch for this Stars team and not surrender that lead that the Stars built up after taking that 4-3 lead. And overall, just a fantastic game. The atmosphere at that game was like that of a playoff matchup. Dallas fans are 100% committed. It's really, really cool to see night in and night out. At every single game, the Stars fans always show up, pack the place out. It's always loud. So I can't wait till the postseason if the Stars get there, which I'm really hoping they do, because I can't imagine how much louder that building is going to be whenever it's playoff hockey and not just regular season hockey. Today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. Low calorie, high protein. Replace your candy bars with Built Bars. They're better for you. Typically, a candy bar can be anywhere from 200 to 300 calories, whereas most Built Bars contain 130 calories, only 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. Mint brownie, coconut almond, and a new for this month, white chocolate cookies and cream. All flavors are delicious, and new flavors are coming out all the time. If you think a flavor might be good, they'll make it. It will be delicious, and it will be good for you. At Built Bar, they are all about the taste. They make it taste delicious first, and then figure out how to make it healthy. And I don't know how, but they pull it off every single time. You can go to Built.com right now and use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off your order. Again, use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off your order at Built.com. Jumping back into today's episode of Locked On Stars, your first listen of the day. Folks, it was fantastic to see the Dallas Stars get wins on Sunday and Wednesday at home against the Sabres and the Kings. Home points are so crucial, especially this time of year where every point matters for every single team, especially those in the playoff hunt. So it's great that the Stars are continuing to be able to defend home ice. It's something that they've done relatively well all season long, barring a few external examples, whether it's Montreal, Ottawa, the Vegas Golden Knights, you name it. They've had some slip-ups at home, but overall, they've done a fantastic job defending the American Airlines Center on a consistent basis. But the month of March will be an absolute gauntlet for the Dallas Stars, because from here on out, they only have 3 more games at home this month. And the road games are not just simple, road games. We know they took that East Coast road trip I guess about a month ago, where they played Buffalo, they played Detroit, they played Philly, they played New Jersey. They're going to be playing some of the best talent in the National Hockey League. A few teams that they haven't seen at all this season, haven't seen since the 2019-2020 season, which is just going to be absolutely insane. Teams like the Islanders and the Maple Leafs, teams that haven't matched up with Dallas in quite some time. And this is, like I said, just an absolute gauntlet of a road trip. Starting off tonight in Winnipeg, 3 divisional games due up. Winnipeg tonight, Minnesota, not Nashville. Nashville's on Tuesday, and Minnesota on Sunday. And then, of course, like I said, Nashville on Tuesday. So those are 3 tough games there. Buildings that the Stars have lost in all this season. They've lost at Winnipeg, they've lost at Minnesota, and they've lost in Nashville. So these are buildings that are difficult to play in, but also teams that the Stars have handled at home. And even most recently against Nashville on the road, the Stars did hold their own and were able to get a point out of that matchup despite not coming away with the win. But not just that, like I said, they'll play Toronto. They'll go to Carolina and take on the Hurricanes. I know that the Stars beat them at home earlier this season, but there's been a lot of time between now and then. And the Canes are looking like a dang good team that can make a deep playoff run come the spring and summertime. Of course, this month they will also go to Anaheim twice. They'll go to Washington. And those are, really just some of the other top teams that they'll play during this stretch of March. And all of those teams that I just named are, in fact, playoff teams. If I was looking at the schedule correctly, I believe the only 2 teams that the Stars will play in the month of March that are not currently in the playoff picture and will not be are the Montreal Canadiens and the New York Islanders. And even the home games for the Stars are going to be incredibly challenging. They have the Rangers, the Oilers, and the Canucks, teams that are all very much in the playoff picture. The Rangers seemingly having their spot in the Eastern Conference playoff secured. The Oilers and Canucks in contention for the wild card spots with the Stars at the moment. The Oilers especially really tied up for that second spot in the wild card right now, but Vancouver not too far behind either of those teams, still very much in the race. We'll see if they're still in the race by the time they meet up at the end of March. That game doesn't come till much, much later. But the Stars really just need to hone in this month and get adjusted to and acclimated to life on the road. And of course, that's easy for me to say, a spectator of this team who's going to be watching most of these games from my apartment, probably with friends, taking it easy. So that, that's easy for me to say from my position. But I think that this team knows that. I think that this team has grown and matured quite a bit in the way that they play on the road from the start of the season. And I think that they realize what is coming up and what's at stake at the end of this month of March, because they like where they're at right now, the Stars do, which is in a playoff spot, or at least, on the fringe of a playoff spot, in the conversation to be in the Stanley Cup playoffs. But if things go terribly wrong in this month, that whole narrative could switch, and we could be talking about a Stars team that looks different at and after the trade deadline, which in my mind just is not an ideal situation. I would hate to see that happen, because I think that this team has a chance to make the postseason. And if they do make it there, I think they have the real chance to make some noise and, maybe play 1 or 2 rounds, if not a little bit deeper, if things can really fall their way to a great degree. So if the Stars can make it through March in the same spot or better than where they're at right now, I consider that a roaring success. And that's really going to, be the true testament of where this team stands as far as the playoffs go, because March 21st is the trade deadline. They'll be nearing the end of the month, obviously, at that point. So the road schedule will be coming to an end, at least that part of the road schedule. In April, they'll have a few more road trips as well. But, this month is really going to be telling. We've had so many sequences that have been so telling for this Stars team. And sometimes they've passed the test and sometimes they haven't. But this is probably the longest test that they'll have. So this is really going to be, a war of attrition, a war of endurance. Thankfully, there's so many veteran guys on this team that have been in these situations like this before, who know what's at stake, who know that, this might be their last chance to make it to the playoffs and make an actual run, at least trying to get back to the Stanley Cup finals. Guys like Joe Pavelski, guys like Jamie Benn, Tyler Seguin, Alexander Radulov. I think guys like that are really going to need to take the lead and lead the charge for this Stars team and be the emotional leaders, but also the leaders on the ice in the way that they play. And even the younger guys are going to need to step up. Dennis, Rupe, Jason Robertson. It's really going to be a full team effort that is needed if this Stars team wants to come out of the month of March still looking pretty in the playoff race. Today's episode is also brought to you by BetOnline.net. Football might be over this season, but basketball is in full swing for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance props, to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the #1 spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline.net is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline.net, where the game starts. And closing out today's episode of Locked On Stars for the last time this season, giving you a preview of tonight's Stars versus Jets matchup. All three of these meetings between both these teams have required extracurriculars. They've required extra hockey to be played. The only Jets win came back super early in the month of November 2nd, that is, in a shootout. And this is a very different Stars team than we saw back in the stages of early November. This was a team that could not string together any consistent wins for the life of them. This is a team that was struggling to play on the road, despite many of their games to open the season being on the road. But they're much more confident in the road when they play with intensity and when they're able to match the intensity of the team that they are playing against. And we already know if the other three games in this season series are any indication that the Jets are going to come out with plenty of intensity in this game. I imagine there will be a ton of hits along the boards, maybe even a fight or two thrown in there, a lot of scuffles. I'm sure there will be a lot of words exchanged. I mean, there's really nothing leading up to this game indicating that we won't see what we've seen in the previous three meetings between these two squads. And this would be a great game, like I said earlier in the first segment, to have some secondary scoring. You look historically at the Dallas Stars when they play at Winnipeg. Tyler Seguin has 25 points in 16 games played at Winnipeg. Jamie Benn has 16. John Klingberg has 15. So these are guys that are kind of the older, sappy vets of the team, but they've historically been pretty good whenever they go on the road to the Jets building. So we really need to see those three step up along with the top line, along with whoever's in the goal, which I imagine will be Jake Ottinger. We really just need to see what we saw on Sunday and Wednesday, which is a consolidated team effort across the board. It doesn't matter what lines are out there. You're going to get the same amount of effort from every single guy, every single moment of the game, because that's what it's going to take to win these tough road divisional matchups. Winnipeg coming into this game has won 2 straight, but granted, they were against the Arizona Coyotes and the Montreal Canadiens, and that game against Montreal was on Tuesday. So it's been a few days since the Winnipeg Jets have actually played. So I think there's something to be said there that they've played some weaker competition and they've had a few days off. So maybe the Stars can come out quick and catch this Winnipeg team sleeping, get out to an early lead, because that seems to bode well for the Stars on the road when they can hit a team in the mouth early and get out to those quick leads. But all in all, I'm excited for this game, but also there's a part of me that is sick and tired of the Winnipeg Jets this season. All 3 games against them so far have probably taken about 15 years off my life, as of some of the Nashville games this season, and we'll be closing out our season series with them on this road trip. But it would really do me some good to see Dallas steal this season series from Winnipeg in their own building. I think that would be fantastic. It would be a huge boost of confidence to start out this month of March. That's going to primarily be on the road to get a win in a divisional opponent's building and then playing in 2 other tough buildings in Minnesota and Nashville to follow it up. You have to start out on the right foot. Otherwise, you put yourself in a pretty vulnerable position for the rest of the road trip. So with that said, I like the Stars in this game by a score of 4-2. I'm predicting that it won't go to overtime, but I'll probably be wrong on that. I think Jamie Benn gets the scoring started for the good guys because he's been very prominent in just about every matchup that the Stars and Jets have played this season. And I don't see any reason why he won't be heavily involved in this matchup as well. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Stars. Thank you again for making Locked On Stars your first listen of the day. Now go make your second listen of the day, the Locked On NHL Fantasy Podcast. Steele Roden and Flip Livingstone give you all the in-depth information and analysis you need to build the perfect fantasy lineup. You can find them wherever you get your podcast at every Monday through Friday, just like the Locked On Stars podcast, which if you do not already, I urge you to subscribe to and follow us wherever you get your podcast at, whether that's on YouTube or your favorite podcasting platform. We are free and available no matter where you listen or how you listen. And you can find me on Twitter at Dane_Lewis. That's at DANE 2_Lewis. You can also find our show on Twitter at Locked On Stars. Be sure to give us a follow there as well. Every day I've been tweeting out a Stars fan cheering guide for every day across the NHL, showing us what teams we need to win and what teams we need to lose in order for the Stars to be in a better playoff position on a day-by-day basis. So you can get all of that at the Locked On Stars Twitter page. But thank you again for listening to us, Stars fans. I know I took Thursday off. Thank you again for your patience and tuning in today. We're back and better than ever, and we'll be back on Monday to talk about that matchup with Minnesota. We'll see you there, Stars fans. Have a great Friday and have a fantastic weekend.